Howdy, it's Ed. This is the Wrestling for MMA podcast. I talk about wrestling and MMA and everything in between, the intersection between the two, all that. Last week we previewed the Ferguson Oliveira matchup a little bit, and we'll definitely get into that. We also talked about some wrestlers who were on upcoming cards, and we can talk about how they did. I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the performances on the most recent UFC card, and just point to a couple people who are competing in upcoming events that are interesting wrestlers in my mind. So let's start with some event results. Last time we talked about some of the Bellator fighters, and Alima McFarlane was the headliner. I did not watch the fight, but she lost, so there's a wrestler down. I did watch the Magomedov fight versus Matthews Matos. So if you don't know, Magomedov fought Peter Yan twice in ACA. It was ACB at the time, and gave him a really tough go. Was taking him down a lot in the first fight, and Yan was very good off his back, and arguably could have won that one, but he won a split decision. And then the rematch, Jan's wrestling was jumped up several levels, and Jan put on a clinic. So it was a long time between then and Magomedov's next fight, which was on Thursday, and he looked pretty darn good. I would say he looked a little less active. Like it was definitely lower volume, but I would say he focused more. He focused his process more. It's something that happens with really grappling centric fighters. I think should happen more often. A lot of the times when you come from a grappling base, you look to develop the other parts of your skill set, which makes sense. But once you find some success with the other parts of your skill set, you spread yourself a little thin. You spend more time striking than maybe you should. And someone like Damian Maia is a good example of someone who tried out both approaches, where he definitely got away from his grappling a little bit and tried to strike more. And still mixed in his takedowns and still grappled a decent amount, but after a losing streak and after some performances that slipped away a little bit, you saw him doing a lot less on the feet and just focusing really hard and just getting the fights to the ground, minimizing effort on the feet. So I think that's what we're seeing from Magomedov. He was pretty patient from the outside, not doing a whole lot, then had a really explosive, really fast single leg entry. It really reminds me of Khabib, but it's a straight on single. Khabib kind of cuts a little bit of an angle, but yeah, straight on single, snatch single you might call it, but from distance. And yeah, it just has a really nice progression, finishing from there. Usually gets height on the leg pretty quickly and takes up the base, or gets to the cage and works to a double or a body lock or something like that. His mat returns looked awesome. Really, really big lifts. On a lot of those finishes from Magomedov, and I think a lot of people saw the one clip where he did a full rotation in the air on the single, I think, or on the mat return. Actually, it was from rear standing from that rear body lock. He did a full rotation and dumped Matos on the back of his head, on his neck, and his arm bent a weird way. It was pretty gross, but Matos was okay apparently. And then Magomedov's rides were looking pretty solid as well. Looked like he was putting in the Iowa ride, just the one leg sitting on the leg. Used the leg mount position, just very very conventional rides, and didn't have a whole lot of offense from those positions, but controlled Matos very well. And I'm interested to see what he can do against some of the more established fighters in that division at bantamweight in Bellator. He got like Archuleta, and he could have access to Horiguchi, and there's some interesting guys there. So that was cool. And on the prelims, there were two wrestlers. They both won. Romero Cotton, three-time D2 NCAA champion, won. He didn't really look like he knew how to set up his shots on the feet very well, but to his credit, he didn't force them. He didn't panic and try to take the fight down right away. He waited on his opponent, who looked solid. Honestly, his opponent looked like they knew what they were doing and made it annoying for him to initiate anything. But they bid a little too hard on their own offense and ran into him a little bit. It wasn't even a huge opening, but they were out of stance for a tiny little second, a little bit overextended, and then he shot in a huge blast double, and looked pretty solid on top. His top game is pretty good. I think he finished with an arm triangle. So Romero Cotton, keep an eye on him. Let's see how he progresses. Great athlete, great wrestler, great top game. So we'll see what happens there. Also in the prelims, Cody Law. He's also a Division II national champion, and he also wrestled 2 seasons for Penn State in Division One, and was a decent starter for them. He looked really good. He looks like a really good fighter. Apparently, he's fighting out of ATT. I don't know if that means like Coconut Creek proper, but he looked very well trained. Just good process on his feet. Good competent striking. Kept himself pretty safe, and his shot entries look clean, and everything looked good and clean. And he looks like a pretty complete fighter for the level he's at right now. For being 2-0 as a pro at this point, he looks really good. So keep an eye on Cody Law. I forget what weight he's at, but I think probably 155. He wrestled 157 in college. Then the UFC card. Yeah. So let's talk about the main event first. So I spent a decent amount of time, not very long, but a decent amount of time last week talking about Tony Ferguson and just how his wrestling was kind of underrated. I also made a video just showing all the situations where he's been a good wrestler in his career. I don't think. So the big question is, Oliveira dominated him, right? So is Tony was his success very matchup dependent, or is he shot? Is he washed? Is it both? I think it's a little bit of both. Because he's been taken down before. He's had his guard passed. He's been put in bad situations in the ground. Kevin Lee mounted him pretty quickly. Kevin Lee took him down twice. Abel Trujillo took him down. That might actually be it. So only a couple of guys have actually taken him down and exploited anything. You might remember the Danny Castillo fight. He ended up pulling guard. He was defending Castillo's takedowns and then pulled guard. And to be fair, a lot of the shots that I've seen him defend are like doubles from too far away, or singles, or just stuff that he can get grips on and work from. Oliveira's takedowns are very smart in this fight. He had a really all his entries were very clean. There wasn't too much resistance to get through. He picked really nice spots. One of the reads that he made that I really liked, and it was just one takedown per round. One of the reads that he made that I really liked was I believe he caught and ran forward on a kick. It was the lead front snap kick. And Tony used that a whole lot. It was a very high percentage move for him, high volume move for him. And, they definitely game planned around it. And, if someone's kicking straight at you, usually you can, parry down and carry it, or parry down and carry it across. And you saw Usman do that to Masvidal and took him down off of that. But I think Oliveira just kept it in his armpit and ran at him and went across to his neck and took out his leg. But when you have that arm outside the neck, you can push their upper body one way and use your legs to chop out the leg the other way and make them horizontal. So that worked out pretty well. He had a nice double entry. I think his other entries were a lot of just Ferguson being out of position. Ferguson, strikes the way he strikes. Sometimes he gets a little overzealous with his entries, or defensively, like comes out of his stance and spins and does things that compromise him as a wrestler. And usually he's like, oh, I can scramble out of that, or oh, I could offer a choke threat, or what have you. But in this case, I mean, he was just giving up deep entries on doubles in the cage and stuff like that. Oliveira was taking him down, passing his guard, smoshing him whenever he tried to Granby or anything like that. Oliveira just looked like a solid top player. He picked his takedowns wisely. I don't think Tony looked very good in the feet either. He looked pretty flat. I wouldn't say he looked like he was done or washed or shot on the feet. Although physically, if he's not there like he used to be, he's such a physically dependent fighter. Even a small drop off can make a really big difference for him in his game. So I think that's something that you have to think about. That even if he's not washed, just a slight physical decline can make such a big difference for someone like him. Like Aldo, for example, has to bite really hard in his counters and fights a very like athletic, physical style over a long time. Even in his prime, that was causing him problems. So even a small drop off, hurting his cardio or his reaction time or something like that, especially when you're a defensive fighter, that can make a huge difference, right? So even if you're like still taking shots and you look fine, it can really throw off your game and take away a big piece of what makes you successful. So I want you to think about things like that when you think about if someone's shot or washed or what that means if they're past their prime. It doesn't have to be something dramatic, like, oh, he's like falling apart every time he gets hit. It could be a small thing. It just depends on what your game needs. And Tony Ferguson's game was extremely physical, extremely mobile. He had to be creating motion and action all the time. And if your body's not responding quite as well, if you don't feel as strong anymore, especially against Oliveira, who's maturing physically now, he looked very strong and a lot thicker. He's always been more physical than people give him credit for, but now that he's gaining some size and really finding his way in the weight, it looked rough. It looked rough for Tony. I don't think he wins that fight. If they fight 10 times today, I don't think Tony beats him. I think it's just going to be a tough matchup for him. So, I mean, Oliveira was like walking into punches, but he was also hitting some back foot counters. He didn't seem bothered by Tony's offense. So yeah, I don't have a ton to say about the fight. Look forward to some more grappling breakdowns on that fight because I think the actual top game that Oliveira put on is more interesting than how we got him down. But also, big shout out to Ben Cohn, who made a video about Oliveira's reactive takedown game and specifically pointed to ways that Tony's been taken down that are very similar to what Oliveira finds, and that's what happened. Yeah, and I figured, yeah, he probably will take him down. I just wasn't convinced that Oliveira would be able to top game him like that, and wow, he did. So yeah, that was a cool performance. It was definitely a bit of a letdown as a fight because like you wanted Tony to offer him something and not just get blown out, but it's a cool coming into form for Oliveira. People are going to respect him a lot more now, and I hope he gets a crack at somebody in the top 5 soon. He matches up pretty well with those guys, honestly. If we take a look at the rankings, well, Ferguson I think might still be ranked number 3. I think that's correct. I think Gaethje is number 1. Yeah, Gaethje's number 1, Poirier's 2, Tony 3, Conor McGregor 4, Dan Hooker 5. This is a very unique spot for Charles Oliveira, where if you just think about him as a grappler purely in this sense, Justin Gaethje looked like a pretty good wrestler against Khabib. He defended a lot, but when Khabib got deep on the legs, was able to turn the corner and got to his back. I mean, that was pretty much game over. Took him down the cage as well. I don't see Oliveira being able to pressure Gaethje well into those situations, and despite him being not durable, I just don't think he would hold up well trying to pressure Gaethje. I think he'd get blasted. Let's throw that one out. But just if Oliveira found out a craftier way to draw him in and get to his legs and take him down, that could be a pretty big spot for Oliveira. I wouldn't favor him there though. Dustin Poirier, another one where I would worry about him pressuring just because of the counter punching. I mean, everyone except Tony is a pretty dangerous counter puncher in that top 5. But again, somebody with a suspect ground game against an elite grappler, I would say suspect is the right word. I don't think Dustin or even Gaethje have necessarily bad ground games. Dustin's is better, but I think Oliveira would probably exploit it. So that's an interesting fight as well. Conor McGregor, people talk a lot about him not having a good ground game. I think he has a better ground game than Dustin or Gaethje. So that would probably be an interesting one. And I think his ability to not get pressured is a lot better than either of the other two guys. I mean, if you look at Khabib versus Conor didn't start to get put on the cage until much later in the fight. So I think that could be interesting. But yeah, I mean, those are guys with grappling vulnerabilities. The grappling is not the height of their skill sets, and Oliveira has put something together on the feet where I think he could hang a bit with those guys, but yeah, probably gets blasted by most of them. But it's just if he really focuses in on how he's going to be taking people down and crafts game plans around how he's going to take these guys down, I could see it happening. I could definitely see it happening. We talk about specialization, right? Oliveira has really, really grown as a striker, but now he needs to decide how is he going to beat the top 5 of his division. And Dan Hooker, that's a weird one because I think Hooker's vulnerable enough on the feet where Oliveira might try to stand with him a little more. But Hooker's got that weird thing where he can just tank whatever you throw and hang in the pocket and fire back really hard and counter you. which we've seen a bunch of times. But like a specific moment to look at is when he knocked out Gilbert Burns. He got pieced by a combination and then was just still there and just waited for Burns to be open and countered him, knocked him out. So yeah, it's interesting. And then the only person above Oliveira other than that is RDA, and I hope to God they don't make that fight because that seems like a waste of time to me. Like if RDA is somehow good enough to beat him at this point in his career, that's awesome. Hats off to RDA. But then he just killed a contender, and all you have left is old RDA, who has question mark amount of time left as being someone that can put a fight together. So don't do that. So those are my thoughts on the lightweight division now that Oliveira won. My thoughts that no one asked for. Other stuff on that card. I mean, obviously the main event, right? So was I calling that the main event? That's not the main event. The main event was Figueiredo versus Moreno. And there was wrestling in that fight. I specifically want to talk about body locks because, man, I think Figueiredo got taken down by every body lock Moreno tried. And it's not just a matter of Figueiredo has bad takedown defense or Moreno's really good at body locks, because I don't think it's either of those things. I think this just might be one situation where Figueiredo really doesn't know what to do. He just might not have been told. Or he's just not used to people trying to hit the takedown that quickly. And because what he was doing was whenever Moreno got to the body lock position, it's like when they were throwing hard, right? Moreno was dipping under, which is dangerous because, Figueiredo does have a nice uppercut, but he's dipping under, coming back up with double underhooks and getting the body lock or over unders even, and stepping around to hit it really quickly. Figueiredo was reaching up. He's reaching up and over. So if someone has double underhooks on you, the natural response is, oh, I need double overs. Fine. Get double overs. That's fine. It doesn't matter. But the rest of his body wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there. He was in his normal stance, and Moreno was moving him back, and his feet came together, and he's, oh, I can trip you very easily now, and he did. Blocked out his base and took him over the other way and collapsed him. He did it over and over and over again, and Figueiredo never responded better. You need to get your hips back. If someone wants to body lock you, you need to get your hips back. Read my article. I broke down Alex Marinelli and Vincenzo Joseph. They had a really funny dynamic where Vincenzo Joseph inside tripped Isaiah Martinez in the NCAA finals on two separate occasions. So for Vincenzo Joseph's first and second NCAA titles, he won by inside tripping Isaiah Martinez. And Isaiah Martinez is always looking for underhooks. So he's coming into underhooks and they're getting into these over-under situations. Vincenzo's letting him push him back and he's hopping back in for the inside trip. So he welcomes those positions, whereas Alex Marinelli is someone who's really good from underhooks as well and body locks. And he said, okay, so we're going to counter your counter with my counter. So it's like third layer game planning, right? Where he's getting his underhook and he's saying, let's go, like inside trip me. And then when he sees him trying to come in for the inside trip, he crushes the body lock and takes him straight to his back. And then they had more matches after that. And you can see in their subsequent matches how each of them is adjusting to that position. But, the way that Joseph avoided getting body locked was he got his hips way back. He stepped further back and he kept his lock. And in MMA, that opens you up to striking. Your body's open for striking, but that's better than getting taken down over and over again, I would say. So there's that. But also, if you don't need to get double overhooks or over under or whatever you're going to do, you can also just block the hips. And if you block the hips, it also helps for not getting ground and pounded. So basically, you have to reach inside and across their hips. And that should be a pretty solid defense. And just back up, get your hips back, get put on the cage, whatever. You're way stronger than Brandon Moreno. You can get out of the clinch with him. It's just this specific counter where you need to have a quick reaction, and he didn't do it. He got doubled once too, which was interesting, but normally his shot defense or his shot counters are pretty good. He looks really strong in those positions, but here he just looked kind of useless. So credit to Moreno for continuing to hammer that, because if you have a fighter who has an advantage in a fight and it's working multiple times, never stop doing it. Like, why would you stop until they give you a reason to stop? So yeah, for sure, good on him for hammering the weakness. Uh, that's a good sign for him as a fighter. Um, but yeah, that was annoying. That annoyed me. Cool. So that's results, things that happened. Gavin Tucker's performance was really cool. I'm not going to go too deep into it right now because I haven't done the research because I'm going to write about it. So I'm going to watch it again. But he had some really nice clinch entry tactics, basically off of Quarantillo's offense and a little bit weaving into it from his own offense. And just really good underhook entries and punching the underhook and getting angles and hitting body locks and dragging him back across from the body lock. So playing with his feet. So I'm gonna write about that, I think. And then next week I'll probably write about the individual World Cup and men's freestyle. So the individual World Cup is just the World Championships, but it's not the World Championships because not enough countries are participating. The U.S. isn't going, Japan isn't going. There are a few other countries that aren't going, so it doesn't count as a real World Championship. So they're calling it the individual World Cup. It's still in Serbia. It's the same place. Russia's going to be there. Cuba's going to be there. Georgia's going to be there. Most of the big nations are going to be there. So a lot of cool stuff's going to happen. I'm most interested, I would say, in 74 kilograms because Frank Camizo and Rosenbeck Jamalov are going to wrestle probably in the finals, depending on the seeding. And Jamalov just beat Khetik Sabalov, and Sabalov beat Sidakov. So Sidakov is the two-time world champion, hasn't lost in 2 years, and then at Russian Nationals he loses to Sabalov, and in the finals Sabalov loses to Jamalov. So that is the depth there. So your returning two-time world team member could actually be third on the chart if you're thinking about it that way. So they're sending Jamalov for this one. I still think they'll probably do Sidakov for the Olympic team. It was a close match. It was a really close match between Sabalov and Sidakov. So I'm not really sure what the actual, who's better than who is because they've had a bunch of close matches before, and Sidakov does wrestle close matches against a lot of people. So it's not like he's blowing everybody out. He's just really clutch, and the world is really tough. But I don't think we've ever seen Camizo and Jamalov wrestle before, so that'll be really cool, and it'll tell us a lot about both of them. But yeah, there's a bunch of other cool stuff. But just go to the fight site and read Seth Patera's previews and the rankings. Check out the rankings to see who's going to be there. But yeah, that's going to be Wednesday when Worlds starts. So look forward to that. I'll definitely write about that. And other stuff to look forward to, I would say there's an ACA card, ACA 116. That's on Saturday, same day as the next UFC card. And in the main event, Marat Balayev is fighting at Felipe. I think it's Frois. I don't know how to pronounce it. Frois, but he's the featherweight. He was the featherweight champion. Did he lose the title? What happened there? No, he's the featherweight champion. Yeah, he won the title over Salman Jamaldayev, who is a cool, well-rounded fighter and had crazy fights with Balayev before. And Balayev is like, if you don't know, how old is he? He's 44, and he didn't start fighting and think until his 30s. And the reason why it took so long is because he was in prison. He was in prison for a long time. Then he got out and started fighting. Look, there's a really good article about that. But he has wins over Yusuf Raisov. And you might know Diego Brandao a little better. But he is an old man. He fights like an old man. But he's just super gritty, durable, decent boxer. Good like procedural wrestler. He gets like singles in the cage and really works those positions. He gets the body lock and just chain wrestles really well, and holds people down and has a decent ground game. So I look forward to him. I hope he wins. Oh no, I guess I don't hope he wins just because I want the younger guy with the bigger upside. Frois is a really good boxer. I think I want him to win, but just throwing it out there. And then anyone else on that card that I would want to talk about in a wrestling context? I don't think so. But the one card has a few guys on there, but I'm not going to talk about that until they show that they're worth talking about. So look it up for yourself. And then the UFC card upcoming, I don't really think wrestling is going to be a big deal on it. Wonder Boy and Jeff Neal, I can't imagine they're going to wrestle. Aldo and Vera, I don't think so. Although it'd be kind of a smooth move for Aldo to really get a wrestling game going at this point, because I know he has it. I know he can do it. He tried to wrestle Jan a little bit, but that didn't go very well. But someone who is a less dynamic athlete and also a worse wrestler, that could be a better look for him. But knowing Aldo, who'll probably just sit on the back foot and let Vera try to hit him, because Vera spends every fight pretending to be an outfighter for a couple of rounds before he realizes he's a swarmer. I don't think either are going to go that well for him, but Aldo could just be shot and not be able to defend. But I think Aldo's going to win. And yeah, none of the other fights on the main card look like they're very wrestly. The prelims has like Bilal Muhammad. I know he's capable of putting a competent grappling performance together. Duran Win is fighting. Poor Duran Win. That's a sad story. He is national team. He was national team in freestyle while he was fighting. Like, he was still making national teams. The national team is top 3 at the weight in the country. So he was, losing in the trials, things like that, but still very high placing domestically in freestyle while he's doing MMA. So he's very legit. He's one of the better wrestlers in MMA, but he just does not figure out how to do MMA, and I think he can't get his weight figured out either. So it's just a sad situation. He's not very good. Ayman Zahabi from TriStar, that's Faraz's brother. He's fighting. He's good. And yeah, that's Jillian Robertson. She's a women's flyweight. She hits single leg entries a lot and goes to the crackdown finish. And I think that's a pretty cool position for a grappler of her caliber, and she should probably hit that hop over. You ever jump your hips over? Like, when you get to a single leg, you're in the position to run the pipe. Instead of running the pipe, you kind of crash and get your hip and your head to the mat on the side that you have the single, and bring their hip down. It's a really risky way to finish if you're messy as a wrestler, not sound positionally, or, screw up the crackdown and put yourself on your own hip. But you should be able to get, chest down and get their hip on the mat, and then either try to like double off, or basically get height on your hips and jump them back over their legs to go cross body. You can also jump straight back over, like with your chest facing the air, and then turn in. But yeah, she likes to crack down. That's the only thing I remember about her wrestling, is she hits a lot of singles, and that's her preferred finish. But yeah, so I think there'll be a decent amount to talk about next week afterward. And I think we'll talk a lot about freestyle, because next week's card also doesn't have a lot of good wrestlers on it. Nope. I mean, there are wrestlers on it, but no one I really want to talk about. It looks like it's going to be a while until there's any like really big wrestling-based matchups. I'm looking through the UFC cards. I'm not really seeing it. Bellator will probably bring something up faster with their tournament. Yeah, I'm still looking. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a long time. It's going to be Usman Burns probably. That'll be the next time I'll actually have to care about wrestlers in MMA. But yeah, I'm going to be on the lookout for prospects. I'm going to be peeking through the cards, read my articles on Bloody Elbow, and read everyone else's stuff on the fight site, listen to our podcast, subscribe to YouTube channel, all that. Yeah, and follow me on Twitter at Edward Gallo MMA, and we can talk about whatever. If you are not a jerk or racist or anything like that, I will definitely talk to you. So hit me up. That's it. Goodbye.